So let's have a look at what's going on here and what each of these nodes is doing and bringing to the party, as it were. Let's make ourselves a little bit of room. I'm going to join these windows, holding my mouse in the area in between. I'll get double arrow, right click, join areas, and you can see you can get this arrow telling you which screen's going to join to which. Just making myself a little bit more room here so we can see what's going on. Right, so we started off, let's disconnect that for a minute. We started off with the Musgrave and the Voronoi, and if I control shift click on that, that's what we started off with. Okay, and we added some colour in, and the base colour is that dark brown, then it's lighter brown, and you can see these colours getting mixed in here. Okay, but we wanted to compress this up a lot, so we used a mapping node, and when we connect the mapping node, we're able to control through the scale the basically we're squashing it down quite a lot, so we're getting these long grains in it which we want in a wood. Okay, with the mapping node taking the texture coordinate tells Blender really how to map the texture. It's generated because we're using procedural. We'll want to use a generated. If we were using an image texture, we might want to use UV. But if I disconnect that generated, you see Blender doesn't know. It's just kind of mapping a somewhere in between these. So we need to tell Blender to generate the texture. We need to tell Blender to scale. And then we're using these two textures. The Musgrave is kind of this banded one, which is influencing the Voronoi to give us this wood grey type look, which then comes on to the principle to give us our colours. We can change the look of the wood with the colours. So for example, if we take this base colour and make it lighter, we can get a more kind of pine or maple look. Or something far more contrast. You know, we could do the same with this. We could actually bring this down. We can play around with these colours and make whatever kind of wood we want. Now with this principled, I added specular. Well, before we get to that, a Voronoi, we're feeding into the metallic. What a metallic does is, well, let's disconnect the metallic from that, and let's disconnect that for the moment. So we're just feeding this principled into the material output. Metallic will give it a metallic quality or not. Let's turn the subsurface down for a minute. Kind of hard to see because it's very flat, but basically it gives it more shine or not, depending on geometry. But we're using the metallic to tell Blender to use these colours according to how to mix. So some parts of it will look metallic, some parts of it will look kind of more plasticky or flatter. Alright, let's plug this back in again. Right, I want something a bit brighter here, I think. There we go, that's looking a bit better. I added specular tint and roughness. The reason I added specular and specular tint is because I wanted a kind of a varnished glossy look. Okay, it's not quite there yet, but you can see that it if I take the specular out and the specular tint out and the clear coat out, we lose all that. I'll come to the clear coat in a minute. So we added the specular tint, and the roughness, and then we added a clear coat. So we're getting some light, some specular coming through. Okay. We also added from the distance some displacement, and we put this multiply in to be able to control that displacement. This displacement, although it's at 0.1, it's actually very high. If I put that down to 0.01, have a look at what happens up here. So 0.01. Okay, we're getting more of this specular coming through from the lamp planes here. If I turn this roughness down, okay, and if I go indeed lower than that, 0.005, you can see we're getting more of it coming through. 0.001, and we're starting to lose it there because we're losing the displacement on the surface of this. So there is a very fine line. 0.01. Let's try about there. But you can see we're picking up the highlights from the lamps. Alright, the clear coat adds that gloss. If I turn the clear coat off, you can see it goes completely. So we can also control the amount of that gloss comes through with the amount of clear coat. And obviously the roughness. Let me try and find a better angle. Alright. You can kind of see the marked line of the lamp down here. The roughness are like the roughness in the glossy shader like we talked last week. So the more roughness we get, the more kind of unrefined that line becomes. So once again, it's a personal choice how much you want in there. I want something around there, I think. Alright, so I think that covers it all. I think the best thing we can do now is bake a texture. So let me just bring this to a image editor, and we'll add a new texture. Let's call it Wood 1. Wood Light, actually. Then I'll bake a dark one after, and we can compare them. So turn off the alpha, press OK. We can come to the UV editing. We can pick up a Wood Light texture. The plane is already unwrapped, so we could go ahead and bake. So I'm going to go to a render tab here, bake my samples 128, that'll do, and I'll go ahead and bake. No active image found, because silly me didn't add the image to the shader panel. So Shift A. Let's add that texture, the image texture, and let's pick up that Wood Light texture. Now we can bake. So let's go ahead and bake, and I'm going to pause while that's baking. Okay, so that's finished baking. Let's have a look at our texture. And you see it's actually baked quite nice. I like that. And we're picking up the specular highlights on it from the emission plane. Yeah, I quite like that. If we were to go into, let's go into a look dev view. Not sure why that's not showing up there. Anyway, Control Shift and click to make that an output. There we go. We can see how it'll look in world. Let's hide these other planes for the minute, so not distracting. You can see how it look in world. It's going to look quite good. Right, Control Shift click on there to reset that. Let's go back to rendered view. It's dark because I hid my lighting. Let's bake a second texture with different colours. Let's go lighter on this, bring it more of that kind of maple look. Maybe a bit lighter on this, darker, lighter. Yeah, more of a maple look. You can see the difference between the two there. Alright, so let me add a new image. Let's call that maple. Okay, we'll change this over to maple. Well, perhaps I should have saved that first. It doesn't matter. Anyway, change this over to maple. Make sure that node is selected and bake. That's baking okay now. And once again, I'll pause while that's baking. Okay, that's just about baked. There we go. Right, let's have a look at that full screen. It's that lighter wood again. Obviously there's more light down this side of the wood than there is up that side, but you see we're picking up some of the specular. And if we compare that to the other wood, you can see how just changing the colours can completely change the look of something. Okay, now, while this works great on a flat surface, if we were to, let's go to edit mode, let's just go to look depth for a minute so I can see what I'm doing. If we were to extrude, I've got everything selected, extrude down to a cube type of shape, so extrude on the Z-axis. You can see it looks fine there and on that, but on the third axis it doesn't. Okay, so if you were making furniture, say you know, the bed or whatever, on one side of your wood it's going to look odd. You would think that you could adjust that with a scale, so let's see, that would be the X direction. We could scale up the X, and you can, but then look at the top. So you're always going to have this kind of problem. Alright, so let us assume this X and Y are okay. If we wanted to also get this long grain on the top, we're going to have to do that with a different material. So let me select this face, and I'm going to part it off for now so it's its own object. So G. Right, I'm going to copy all of these nodes, all except this one. Actually, let me delete that one for the minute. So let me select all and Control C. Right, I'm going to come to my materials tab. I've got my top selected, and I'm going to get rid of that material. Alright, I'm going to add a new one, and you might think this is a waste of time, but it's not. And just paste those nodes, so we've got the same thing. But what I can do now is I can adjust the scale on this as I need without affecting the rest. Okay, so I've got this kind of long grain wood on all sides and its own separate material. So let's call it, well, material 002. Well, let's call it wood 2 or wood top. Right, so I can join these together again, Control J, so it's all one object and it'll have two materials. So how do I go about baking that? Well, first of all, let me apply all transforms. Control A and all transforms. Let me go into edit mode. Let's select all. And let's unwrap. Let's go into UV editing actually. Let's unwrap. Okay. I need to mark seams, it looks like. So let me do that. I just need 4 seams, these 4 edges, because I have got a bottom. Okay, 3, 4. Right click, mark as a seam. Alright, I'll select the bottom face, go to edges, right click, mark as a seam. So let's select all again, unwrap. So we've got a nice unwrap area, top and bottom, and 4 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so let's come back into shading. Let's make a new texture to bake this to. So we'll do new, and let's call it box. Okay. Right, so I've got my first material selected. I need to add that box texture. Shift A, texture, image texture, and let's change that to the box. Okay, select my second material, and I need to add that same texture. Shift A, texture, image texture, and we'll make sure that's box. Now we need to make sure both these textures are selected, which they both are. Okay, and then we can bake these two materials onto the one texture. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll press bake, and once again I'll pause while that's baking. Okay, that's just about finished baking. What have we got left here? Half a second by the looks of it, but obviously it's taking longer. Well done, Blender. Right. Hasn't baked to that box. Why not? That's strange. My normal should be okay. Face orientation. No, they're not. All inside out. Okay. Select that object. Let's go into edit mode. We're in face select. Select all. And Control N. Not Control N. Alt N. Recalculate outside, and this one Alt N, flip. Alright, bake this again. I suppose my normals were inside out. Alright, we'll bake this again, but actually it occurred to me while that was baking that my lighting might not be good for around the back, so let's have a look at it in rendered view. Yeah, we could do with another lamp over here, I guess. Let's go into object mode, select this lamp. Let's Shift D. Throw a bit of light on the back of the subject. There we go. So the bottom will be a bit darker, but we've got more light around the sides. Alright, so my normals were flipped, so I'm going to have to bake this again. So I'm going to select my material, or my object. I've got two materials on that object, and both of them have this box texture. And I'm going to bake again, and I'm just going to pause while that's baking. Okay, so if at first you don't succeed, try again. Hopefully this time it will bake, and it has. Wonderful. So we baked our two materials. That's obviously the bottom, the top, and 4 sides. We baked our two materials onto one object. Okay, that's looking great. The trouble is we now have two materials where we only need one. But that's quite easy. What we can do is delete both these materials. 1, 2, and we can make a new one, and I'm going to call this combined. Alright. So we've got a new material. We don't want this principled anymore. We don't need all of this stuff going on. So let's get rid of it. And let's add our texture back. Our image texture, and we'll open up the box, and we can either add an emission node here or Control Shift click to bring it back, and that basically is our texture. And just to prove this is an emission node, it says it there, it's just labeled differently. So we brought this back to one material, so we're using one less material slot in Second Life. That's how it's going to look, all baked. And that is what we're going to need to do with wood, because we can't get the grain looking right on all three planes. We're going to have to do it in two materials and then combine them into one. Okay, so for homework this week, let me think. I want you to make a simple dresser or a table with a drawer, and make it wood and bake a texture on it. Because with a dresser or a table, you know, the grain of the wood will run one way, the grain of the legs will run the other way, so it's going to give us a chance to practice this and get our grains looking right. But so a dresser or a table with a drawer should give us a chance to do that.